Welcome back to the Social Impact Level Up podcast. This is where we blur the lines between business, nonprofit, and impact. I'm your host, Wendy V, and I'm a social impact strategist here to help you build a successful and sustainable legacy of social change. In this week's episode, we're going to hear from a social entrepreneur who has been on a journey to change the world just like you. If you are interested in social entrepreneurship, this is the place for you. Let's jump right into this week's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. We are here today with one of my very favorite people to talk to, Norma Reyes. We are going to talk all things career, maybe some woo-woo stuff, and of course, the nuances of being a Latina in a professional environment and starting your own coaching business. This is going to be a really dynamic episode where I am going to be joined by my co-host in the episode. Rodrigo Bravo is here today with us. And today we will dig into all of the knowledge and wisdom that Norma has to share. Rodrigo, what do you want to say?
I'm just excited to be here. Really happy to have this conversation with Norma, with Wendy, and really just kind of continue the work that we've been doing for the podcast here, the Social Impact Level Up Club Collective. So excited to be here. Happy to make this happen. Thank you so much, Wendy and Norma, for being here.
Yeah, and Norma, we're excited to get to know you. We're excited for our audience to hear all that you have to say. So we're definitely going to just jump right in. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit more about you and how did you end up where you are in your career right now?
Yeah. Well, thank you both for having me on. So my name's Dr. Norma Reyes. I have my PhD in adult professional and community education, and I have my master's in counseling. I'm a licensed therapist in the state of Texas. And we'll start with how did I get here? So I had no idea what I wanted to do, as probably most of us do when we're teenagers and we get asked the $1 million question about what we want to do with our lives. And when I can't even remember the first time. Well, actually, I can. It was like fourth grade. And I remember saying I wanted to be a judge. And I had no idea what you had to do to be a judge. And no one ever told me either. When I said I wanted to be a judge, I remember creating like a diorama of like a courthouse that was like saying what I wanted to be. And so I don't know how I forgot that. I mean, that would be kind of neat. I do know that you could be a justice of peace without having a law degree. So maybe one day that's still something I can do long future from now. I say like I'm like super young, but I'm in my late 30s, almost going to hit 40 at the end of the year. Um, so I kind of forgot all of that. And I got told all through school that that I was smart, that I should do computers. And this is when computers were like the thing when you would say, oh, I'm going to major in computers, but it's so much more, right? There's so many different ways that you could work in tech. There was no word for tech or working in the tech field. At the time, it was just called computers. And I just went into computer science because I was told that I was smart. I took a HTML class, which is completely different than computer science, but I didn't know any better. Um, so my freshman year was a very interesting learning experience in college. I am the first in my family to go to college. Both my parents are from Mexico. They have like up to sixth grade level of education. And they had limited English proficiency. So really it was just me the whole time really trying to figure it out, going to my counselors and asking questions, and really often getting really poor advice from me and my unique situation. And every time I would go to someone I thought knew more or could help me understand what I could do better, they always told me to do something different than my own inner guidance told me to do. And I went with what they told me to do because I assumed that they knew better than me, but they don't know me better than me. They just know the situations, right? What from their level of understanding. And part of it is too is we don't know what questions to ask. So I didn't know what questions to ask. They didn't know me to really give me good advice. And so I majored in computer science for a year. I thought I was doing poorly because I was making C's coming from high school, making A's and B's, and making C's in college felt terrible. So I changed my major. No one talked to me, no one asked me why. I had a couple of different experiences that happened in my freshman year. One of them was a professor telling me that I was committing plagiarism and I could get suspended when in actuality, um yeah, I'll tell you that story. So, it was my C plus plus course, and I submitted my work, and I had a classmate who had asked me to see my work. So for those of you that aren't familiar with C++ or programming in general, it's basically like an essay. And you give that to somebody else, they could do modifications, but essentially your body of work is yours. And if they copy it, it's going to be obvious, like a piece of paper would be, like an essay. And so he called us both up and he pointedly looked at me and said that I copied my classmate because my classmate was a male. And I was so embarrassed. I never even talked about anybody about it. Probably, I don't even know, maybe when I was already getting my master's degree, never once did I was so ashamed that I was accused of that, that I just ran away and changed my major to communication design, which, computer science, communication design, and I really enjoyed that major, but I didn't feel like I had the passion. And it's like kind of doing like art and marketing, but I felt like I didn't have the competitive edge for that. And so I kind of then had a psych course, went into psychology. I love learning about the human mind, how we work, how we develop. And that's kind of how I got into behavioral health and all of them. And then as I reflected back, I was like, I want to help people and specifically high school age children, adolescents, people in college to know that maybe the advice they're getting isn't what it's right for them. And I want to empower people to know that what they think is right is what's right for them. I didn't have the words back then that that's what I wanted to do, but that is why I decided to get my master's in counseling. And then it just kind of took me a lot of different places that I didn't think I was gonna be at. Like, I really got into behavioral health, working with people with bipolar, schizophrenia, major depression, and now I work in corporate in the health insurance side, but in a behavioral health department, which a lot of people probably don't even know that their health insurance has a whole group of therapists that are meant to work for you as your insurance provider to help you get connected to behavioral health resources. So that's what I do in my day job. But in 2019, that whole spark got rekindled as to like why I wanted to go into counseling in the first place and really was to help guide others.
I love that, and you hit on so many things I wanna talk about right now. I'm sure Rodrigo also is like, "Oh, we could talk about this and this and this." But let's go back to that moment that you mentioned where you realized somebody thought you were copying off of a white male peer versus asking you a question about it or even asking you to, further investigating, but just assuming that because you maybe are a minority or maybe because you're a woman in a field that's predominantly men, that you weren't the source of the information. I mean, I that must have felt Oh, it was
So
a
we were
Latino peer.
like,
Okay.
yeah, yeah, there was only him and another Latino in the class. And so um it and so the professor was Indian or Middle Eastern or, you know, South Asian, I don't know. He wasn't white himself either, but I think it was just because I was the woman and my peer was the male that I got pointed as the person. And we had already been in the course for some time. It wasn't in the beginning. So he's already seen my work. So I would think that just like an English teacher could know their students' work compared to someone else's, he didn't distinguish that, right? Like you took my work as this is not my work because I turned it in for whatever reason. Um, I was so embarrassed because he called us at the end of class. I didn't know why he was calling us. And, there's still other students around. And he basically admonished me in front of my male peer that was next to me and then whoever else might have been in the class. And I had never been in such a situation before. Being an A student, being constantly told you're smart, I wasn't prepared for that situation. And there was nowhere for me to go. So I felt, right? Because I'm sure there was resources for me. But at the time, I didn't know about them. I was unaware, first person to go to college. If I took that to my parents, knowing my Latino parents, very traditional, they would have told me, well, what are you doing that you are being accused of this? They would have sided with authority versus myself. So I didn't take it to them. I didn't even tell my friends in college that that had happened. I was so embarrassed. And maybe they would have helped guide me through that. But I just really didn't know how to process it. I think now, years and years later, I'm able to process it and see like how disempowered I felt as a minority student in college.
Rodrigo, do you have any questions you want to ask about this whole thing? I'm sure you have opinions.
I I think Norma brings Dr. Norma, and I apologize for not addressing you by your title. I always want to no, I always want to elevate the work that Latinas do because it's tough out there. You're describing an experience that unfortunately many Latina women go through, many BIPOC women go through, where they're challenged for work that they do because a lot of times the men that are there are insecure, they feel threatened, whatever the case may be. So I definitely always choose to elevate, so I apologize for Dr. Reyes, but we'll keep it moving, right? I think what you just described right now is something that unfortunately and tragically happens in so many Latino households where our our our, our mental capacity for accomplishing things to the side for authority, for, the school, the institution, the person that has already been there, and unfortunately, that's something that our parents and our grandparents, have carried through, right? And something that kind of a generational trauma, right? From not wanting to be in my case, for example, my parents were undocumented, and so they're fearful of the authority, but once they make it, they absolutely abide by the authority. And so I kinda wanted to kind of expand on that and see, do you see that a lot in your practice and how maybe going through that has helped shape the way you've been able to help folks?
Yeah, definitely. I think mostly what I encounter, because the clients that I ideally work with and have worked with are those that are stuck in figuring out what they want next in their career, but they don't see their limiting beliefs because they've been achieving, but underneath it, there's something that tells them why they can't do something. And like you said, it could be that parents said, you go to college, you get a job, you get a pension. And so when that's actually really unfulfilling to them, they don't understand why they can't figure out their next career move. And it's because years of go to college, get a job, retire, right? That's like the what we're told to do, and that's really not how it works for us to be fulfilled, especially if, like myself, who was told, "Oh, you're really good at this, do this," but no one asked me what I actually enjoy doing. And then me doing that, and sometimes think like, "Okay, what would have happened had I stayed in that field?" I probably would have excelled because I'm really good at just following rules and, maybe potentially have been promoted there, maybe not because I'm not a showboater, so people probably would have took credit for my work. Who knows what would have happened in that field, right? But at some point, I would have reached a point where I really hate this, but I'm also making a lot of money. What do I wanna do? And that's really what happens, right? There's that balance of, like, I'm meeting my needs, but my soul is craving for something else. So, when I'm working with clients, a lot of times, they don't realize that all of those years of what was instilled and conditioned in them, and not just from our own families, but society as a whole, that is limiting them. So it's really neat to see how the progression between like, "Oh, I'm stuck. Oh, this is why I'm stuck." But it's really kind of doing that inner work.
I love that. And you mentioned your intuition at one point was something that you didn't listen to, but now, because I know you, you're really good at talking about how people can think about what they really want and trust that intuition and lean into it. Can you tell us a little more about your discovery process of how you went from being in this place where you're trying to meet other people's expectations or listening to outside advice to really thinking about yourself as the transformation agent?
Yeah, so that part's really interesting because I've always been very introspective, even in like as far as I could remember from being able to write, I always journaled. And I think that that has really helped me overcome a lot of the challenges that I faced in my childhood. My dad was an alcoholic, he's now a recovering alcoholic. My mom not being there emotionally for me, sometimes even degrading me at times, and I know that she was doing the best that she could, but at with being able to journal really got me through it. I was very internal, right? So I knew I wasn't listening to my intuition. And as time went on and I kind of just would go and figure out each next career move for myself, I really stopped asking people for advice. I kind of just started guiding myself, but I didn't have that conscious trigger of like, "Oh, I'm now listening to my intuition." It took even more years. It actually took completing my PhD and having this transformative experience in my PhD program to really then realize what was going on. So, I completed my PhD in 2019, and then I had my baby, who if I hadn't had that time, I believe, like, after having PhD 2019 May, had my baby in August, was on maternity leave, and that was a pivotal time for me to have that space of no longer always doing, because between 2014 and 2019, I was working on my PhD, I was working full time, I had 2 boys, was pregnant, breastfeeding, pumping, driving an hour each way to go to my PhD program, working on my dissertation. There's so much doing that August 2019, I'm no longer in the PhD program. I have a baby who is like awesome because he sleeps 6 hours, but then nobody needs me. And I was so on the go, right? And we are also so accustomed to that, especially in communities where you always have to do, because if you're not doing, there isn't bread on the table. And so seeing my parents always doing, right? They would come home and then they would still hustle on the side, right? And still hustle. And so that was just inbred in me and many of us as to why we don't know how to stop. But I literally had nobody needing me. My 3-year-old was a lot more independent. My husband was going to school at the time, so he was also home, so he helped a lot with the boys, and my baby's doesn't need me. He's so independent already, and so that created this space of where I felt like, "What am I doing with my life?" That created the time for me to just be and see that there was more for me than the quote unquote American dream of, getting married, having kids, having a job. Like, okay, now, and then it really started to go back to that reflection and reading books and being like, oh, yeah, I really wanted to go into counseling to respark that for people, to remind them that what they believe in themselves, that dream that they have for themselves, is possible. They just have to really believe in themselves again.
I I I love that you are refocusing and letting folks know that it is important to have breaks, to have rest. Latino communities, BIPOC communities are constantly in struggles in a variety of ways, not just financially, but also from society itself, from the way that we have to work against systems that, quite frankly, are built for us. And so I appreciate you talking about rest, talking about taking time, not having to be in that struggle. What exactly, if you can kind of tell us a little bit, growing up, seeing that from your parents, how that maybe impacts a lot of folks without realizing it. Because I believe I was involved with that as well, where I was straight. If there was one thing that people would say, it was like, damn, Rodrigo is a hard worker. That guy busts his ass and blah, 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 right? And I didn't realize though that that was more trauma based as opposed to maybe who I am. Because then once I get through my counseling, I realize, man, I'm just working hard because I feel like I'm trying to survive. Can you talk a little bit about how that affects people and maybe they don't even know that it's realizing that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You just made me think about like 100 examples of that as you were saying it. So to give you guys a little bit more background about me, I have 2 older sisters, but they, like, went to go live with their dad when they were teenagers, so really I became, like, the oldest, and my brother's 4 years younger, and so I was really, like, responsible for us, the latchkey kid where, you lock the metal door as soon as you get home and, there we are, and my mom, she worked a lot of laborers jobs, she still does, she's a custodian now at a state hospital, but at the time before, she worked laborers jobs that didn't have any paid time off, didn't have any insurance, we were on Medicaid, and so even though she worked hard, there was nothing really to show for it, right? Same thing for my dad, laborer's job, doing tree trimming, and so they would both come home, and again, my mom immediately there was no break for her. As soon as she got home, she was cooking and getting everything ready for dinner, and basically, like, we were just expected to be out of the way, be quiet. We had 1 TV, so we all just watched the same thing. I still have 1 TV here too, so I highly recommend it because I think it keeps us all together, but that's something else. Um, but what would happen is my mom would come home and she would just nag me as soon as she got home, and she would just complain that I didn't do anything, that I wasn't cleaning, that the house was still a mess. So what ended up happening, right? The way I rebelled, even though I was like, quote unquote, like straight A, really well behaved child, I got tired of hearing her tell me that I didn't clean the house when I would clean the house for her as soon as I got home. Like, I knew I got home from school, I cleaned the house, I made sure my brother ate something, and then just waited for my parents to come home. But as soon as she came in, and of course, that's probably programming that she had, that as soon as somebody told her that she just wasn't doing, right? Because my mom just saw me sitting on the couch when she got home, so she assumed that I did nothing. So I stopped cleaning the house, and again, she would already nag me, so it was like, "Just you're gonna nag me anyway." But now, like, fast forward to now that if I'm resting, I will sometimes feel like I need to be doing something, especially when my husband comes home. And he's never told me, "You're doing nada," or "You're being lazy," or whatever, but as soon as he makes any gesto, right? It just triggers that in me of my mom telling me, "Ahí estás sentada haciendo nada." Like, and it's like, I did, I swear. It's like, I just worked all day. I deserve to sit on the couch, but it's like, it's a constant something that sometimes we don't even know, right? And what it can happen in those situations is like, maybe your spouse, your partner, whoever comes home and they kind of re-trigger a memory that you don't even realize is there. And then you start fighting about something. So it's really important to just kind of see, what are you fighting about that doesn't matter? And it's something that I always have to tell him. Like, I feel like you're just saying I didn't do anything all day. And he's just like looking at me like I didn't even say anything to you. But I consciously know that also, there was all that constant trauma of my mom coming home and telling me, "You ain't doing nothing all day," just because she sees me sitting on the couch at that particular moment.
Oh, you said so many things in there that triggered me from my latchkey kid story too, that I feel like that little latchkey kid still lives inside of me somewhere, and it's, like, fearful when I have a sink full of dishes that somebody's gonna come in my house and be like, "Why are your dishes not done? You're not doing homework. Why are you not doing these dishes?" It's so funny how those things stay with you for your whole life, and they're such pivotal experiences for you. And when you decided finally to go and do, like, around 2019, 2020, go and do something that was more fulfilling for you, how did you transition into coaching and supporting other people? And what kind of an impact have you been able to make in that part of your career that, maybe it helps, individuals get through some of these issues we've been talking about?
Yeah, and it kinda goes with a little bit of what Rodrigo said, because when I started working with others, I didn't even realize how much I had achieved. I really just focused on, like, I need to keep doing, I need to keep doing, need to keep doing. I have, like, this goal, I have this goal, and just reaching and reaching and reaching. But then as I would work with clients and see, I could see that in them as well, right? That they couldn't even recognize their own achievements because there's this goal that maybe they haven't achieved yet. And here we are, they're feeling stuck and they're not really sure why. And just seeing that unfold, right? Helping them uncover that because that is one of my gifts to be able to kind of see clearly what's going on in their lives. But as a coach, you're not just going to be like, "Hey, this is what's going on." As a coach, you are guiding them to be able to get there so that they don't need you later, so that when they are stuck again, because we are all going to face the same struggles again and again in a different way. Someone else is going to trigger me again, right? Like, and I have to also see that when I mentioned about like, if I'm not always doing, then I also am probably bringing that into running my business and feeling the need to always be doing in my business or what am I doing? Which I've learned to then create boundaries, right? I can't just sit on the couch with my computer working because the whole purpose of having my business is to be able to spend more time with my kids, but it's not working if I'm on the computer and I'm telling them not to bother me. So, you know, being able to see where boundaries need to be created and showing that to the clients and then also helping them just uncover what is actually keeping them stuck, which most times it's just ourselves, especially if you're coming to see me. Because if you've done strategy, if you've done work, then and that hasn't worked for you, then it's your mindset. And that's all really that it comes down to. And when we say mindset, people kind of get hung up on the term mindset, but really what it is just your limiting beliefs or thoughts that have been so conditioned inside of you that you don't even know they're there until you start to explore that more. And you really have to dialogue that with someone so that you can begin to process them because they can come from traumas. They can come from experiences that have happened that maybe were insignificant at the time, but they planted those seeds deep inside of you that now you kind of just gotta uproot those weeds and get them out and then replant new ideas. That's the second part in doing all of that is then, okay, you've identified what is keeping you stuck. But if you're not actually actively putting new healthy seeds, and that could be affirmations, that could be, um, meditations that you're doing, whatever it is that you're working to replant new seeds to sprout, then you can't move forward either. It's not just about identifying it because people might be listening to this right now and be like, I know my struggles and I know you know your struggles, but what are you doing to not only reflect on them, but then replace them with good seeds?
And I see Rodrigo has pulled up your website, which is fantastic, by the way. I love this website. So I don't know, Rodrigo, if you want to add anything about that, but I think the thing I want to say is there's so much power in replacing the negative and the doing with rest and with the I guess the affirmations and the positive part of mental health that really supports you to get through the journey. So I super appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that as well. I also appreciate the whole concept of limiting beliefs and how we don't even realize how our beliefs do limit us and how they really create these barriers from us being the best version of ourselves, if you will. I know that a lot of the people that I work with my clients, they don't even realize what they're doing when they don't realize that and they're just constantly saying no I don't think I can do that and oh that's not what I do and this and that they're not only using those beliefs but they're using the language. I think that's one of the things that I've noticed and they're not only for what you're saying Dr. Reyes but also on your website. It's a beautiful website. You have a lot of different things going on the website, the one-on-one coaching that you offer. We've been running some of the banners there on the bottom of the screen. But you really, I really, the testimonials, if you will, I read a couple of them and talking about one of the key words that got me was heal. Rosie T says, working with Dr. Reyes has really helped me heal. And I think a lot of people don't understand how important it is to heal. We don't walk around with broken legs, right? We don't we don't we don't walk around with cuts that are exposed and can get infected. Mental health needs to be treated the same way. And I was hoping that you can kind of go into that a little bit and why healing is so important and why maybe in our cultura, with nuestras familias, with our people, with our gente, why we haven't taken a more proactive approach towards mental health and mental healing because a lot of times when we talk to folks who, like yourself, Dr. Reyes, came up in our similar upbringings, it's always the same story. We're always smiling together because we're like, "Oh my god, I remember that. Yes, the chancla. Yes, my mom when I graduated, when my dad when I graduated was not happy with it. Pues ahora qué vas a hacer? What are you gonna do now?" And it's like, "What do you mean? What am I gonna do now?" You know, I mean, geez, can we celebrate for a second? I wanted to see if maybe you could kind of chime in on that and how important healing is and understanding where we need to maybe refocus mental health when it comes to our communities, particularly Latino communities.
Yeah, definitely. And especially because when people think about careers, we don't think about our trauma. We don't think about any career trauma that we've had that may not be even be related to our career. It could be as simple as, like you said, your dad telling you, "And what are you going to do now?" Right. And then that is embedded in you whenever you accomplish something. Instead of celebrating that, internally, you have a little voice that says, "Ike, now what? Next goal." I know that I do, until, like, I stop. Like, for example, I started adding a crystal shop in November, and going from 0 to 60, it just happened, and I started selling crystals, and I made about, like, close to 500 on my first month. First month, barely advertising, nothing. Right away, I wanna reach my next goal. I didn't even celebrate it, and then into I was like, wait a minute, let's take a step back." Like, I just hit this goal and now I wanna double the goal because that felt quote unquote easy, but it wasn't necessarily easy. I had already built my audience from 2019 till now. Of course, there's gonna be some people who are interested in crystals, ready to buy, and that opportunity was there, but that doesn't mean that I can just double my profit from 1 month to the next. Like, that's not how businesses grow. And it really took me a step back. Okay, I have to recognize that I achieved this goal and I can't just all of a sudden move the bar for myself. And that is what, might have happened to us growing up. You achieve one bar and quickly someone said, "Okay, well you made it. Now you got to go to this next bar and this next bar." And then where in our lives that repeats itself? Definitely our careers. You could be the one that's hustling and hustling and hustling, meeting all of the productive standards, and then you get told, "Oh, you need to meet this goal now. Oh, you did that? Here's your coworker's work who isn't doing their work." That's re-traumatizing you. What's the point of working so hard and then you are given someone else's work? That's not what you want, and that's not what any of us want, but that's kind of what we've been conditioned to do, right? If you happen to be the sister or the brother who hustled to get all the chores done, you just got more chores. You didn't get "Oh, go chill and relax."
Yeah, they're
You
like,
got
Here's some more work for you. You're really good at it."
Yeah. Yeah. And so, um, with that, I think you were talking about the mental health and the healing and why maybe in our, community, it isn't something that's really pushed or accepted. I think what really has to do with that, our parents' generation and really the older generation, there was a lot of doing. And now that we're moving into more, I guess, technology, remote based work, it is a lot more sitting. There's less active work. And while we may not physically be tired, our minds are more tired. So our parents may have not had as much mental stress as we do. So they can understand it because not only are they having more physical body labor stress, which is completely different from mental stress, we are having a mental stress that they don't understand and that needs to be worked out differently than physical stress. Physical stress, you go and you rest, you enjoy time with others, and that helps your body recover. You get sleep, so and they can find enjoyment in their lives much easier. But mental stress doesn't go away even if you do those things. You actually have to address what's going on. What is the issue that is going on that is causing me this mental stress? We could try to push it back, but what ends up happening with our mental stress when we try to push it back, it shows up in our bodies. There's a really good book called The Body Keeps the Score. And then there's another really good book that I always tell people to read. It's called The Deepest Well. It is a beautiful piece of work. And it talks about how how our behavioral health, mental stress shows up physically and how we pass that down through generations. It is an absolutely great book for everyone to read to really just understand how it shows up and how and why it shows up in our communities over time continuously.
Yeah, I think we're barely starting to understand epigenetics and how different things can change our genetic patterns through generations and particularly traumatic experiences. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, in the course of your journey, I'm sure you've experienced different sort of career traumas or little things that have happened to you. And how have you navigated them as a BIPOC professional, a woman of color, a Latina? What's happened to you, and how have you navigated those situations when those difficulties come up?
Yeah. So being in the San Antonio area, of course, the demographics is a lot different than other communities. So it wasn't until I went into the workplace that was a less diverse, I guess, because I've always been in very diverse. It wasn't until then that I began to hear microaggressions, and at the time, I didn't have the word for what that was. I just know that I was being told things that I felt like, "Why would they say that?" For example, and then this is a very clear example, I was told by 2 peers, "Oh, you're just like a middle-aged white woman." And I was like, what does that mean?" And, we were gonna go and have some drinks and stuff, and it was a day after work. I was like, what does that mean?" Like, and I didn't know what it mean, and this was some years ago. And now I look back and I'm like, they're just stripping my identity away, right? Like, you're okay. You're not actually Latina. You're really like us. You're because us means what? Smart, educated, professional. I mean, I don't know. I didn't ask any questions because I didn't know what they were implying, and maybe they didn't even know what they were implying either, other than, "We like you and you're like us." But again, unknowingly to them, stripping my identity as to who I am. And so what obviously at the time, I didn't do anything then, and now it's still very sticky. I still run into situations where, I mean, we're in video, and so, you still run into situations when you wonder, like, why would say that? And it's really just goes back to they are coming from their level of understanding. And you do need to have to process those things. You could process them with yourself, you can process them with a trusted coworker. I know that a lot of times people always say go and talk to HR, but what is HR really going to do? Um, there's a fine line, right? They would then address it with my superiors, and then, right? Like, but what does it do for me? And for me, at this point, I'm not going to be like, "Oh, that was a microaggression and they need to fix themselves." I just am growing to understand, like, these people only have a certain level of understanding. And since it's not a really affecting my career, and maybe this is not the advice some people need to hear, because there's if someone is harassing you, there's a difference between a microaggression and someone harassing you. If somebody was harassing me, I will definitely take that to HR. But there are times that people say things with an unconscious bias, and they really just don't even know what they just said. So if you really feel the need, you can go and address that with that person and be like, "Hey, when you said this really made me feel this way. I don't want you to think that I'm going to go to HR," or whatever you want to tell the person. That can help you kind of heal that part. But for me in my career currently, it's not something that I am actively addressing, but now I have the words for it. Now I have the control over that. And sometimes that's all we need. Be like, "Hmm, that's funny. That's the level that those people are at." And I'm putting that hand bar really low, right? They're not where you are. So you know how they say, like, why go low? Go high when people go low. And it may not be what we always want to hear until there's that space to be actually make an impact. Because let's say that I was to address that, I do not believe currently that it would impact my career positively. And sometimes that happens and you have to kind of navigate that water. And, maybe in the future would be something that's addressed. But currently, I mean, currently where I'm at, I feel like being more introspective on it and really just seeing people are doing the best with what they know.
I love that you said that, the high, the low, when First Lady of the United States, Michelle Obama said that, I think a lot of people misinterpret that as just being nice and having to, it's more of a way to navigate, like you said earlier, navigate those waters because we can't just go straight to HR because then we understand sometimes that may affect us on our career later on. And these are the kind of problems that we have to navigate, that we have to consider when we're out there. The unconscious bias that you were talking about, I know that when I was in corporate, I encountered that quite a bit. And initially, I didn't really understand how to, I don't want to say combat that, but I guess, interact with that without coming across as aggressive or, oh my God, he's causing problems or he didn't mean that, this and that. It's always a defense of the system, right? It's always a defense of the structure. It's not about how I feel or a defense of, hey, how did that interact with me? And so I'm glad that you bring that up. And I think a lot of times when I work with my clients, I work with them basically mostly at a parent level, but it still shows up. It still shows up in their work and how it goes, and then it starts influencing their decisions with their kids. I wanted to talk about one thing that you mentioned early on in the conversation, and I wanted to go back to it, was about your parents. And this is a saying that I have is I practice grace over grievance because like you said, my parents didn't know any better, you know, and I think, they're working from their frameworks. They're working from what they were received when they were young. I wanted to kind of touch on how maybe somebody can realize that they're going down I don't want to say a bad path, but a path that is not helping them. Is there something that you would recommend folks? Obviously, we've been, coaching is number one, but Wendy does a fantastic job. You obviously do a fantastic job, Dr. Reyes, as by your testimonials, and by the work that you're doing right now. But how can somebody realize that they're going down a path that's, destructive or that's not benefiting them to be the best versions of themselves? I know that self-awareness is tough sometimes, but what are some key indicators that maybe you could provide that you could tell folks like, "Hey, if you're doing this, you might be acting out of trauma or you might be responding this way, and it'll lead to these negative consequences."
Yeah. Yeah, you made me think about like when you're automatically into defensive, automatically taking almost everything anyone says as a direct attack about you, yourself, or your children. Because when you are automatically trying to come back quickly to maybe respond to the person, or maybe you're not responding to them, but you go home and you're just like, F them, they don't know me, and it's true, they don't know you. But to have that response, and just being upset, that can lead you down to then you come home and you're bringing that home and who knows what else is going on, right? Because if you have a short fuse, your kid can come home and just be like, "Mom, I'm hungry." And you just walked in the door and you're already upset because those people don't know you and they're treating you XYZ way. And then that just bleeds into different things. And you also made me think about like in the school systems, you talked about working with parents. Even though I have my PhD, I have my master's degree, I still have that trauma of my parents not being able to advocate for me sometimes. Not that I ever needed it just because I was such a quote unquote good student, but they weren't in the school the same way that I'm able to be in going and talk to teachers, right? My parents were working, so they couldn't make those teacher days. But even when I go in there, I still can feel the presence of my parents feeling that angst and that anxiety of automatically assuming that the teacher thinks I'm uneducated because I'm a Latina. And I have my PhD. So I want to normalize that for people that there may be things inside of you that you are feeling, regardless of where you are in your life. And it's okay to feel that, but you have to ask yourself, why do I feel this way? If you're not asking yourself why you feel a certain way, you're never going to get down to it. Right. And you also talked about your parents being undocumented. I will tell you, I am the most law abiding citizen. And I still get afraid when I see a police officer. Why? Why? Because my parents were undocumented for a period of time. And even when they stopped being undocumented, they still were very afraid of being deported because we are conditioned to know that we can be deported. It doesn't matter. Like, I still even like, because I was born by midwife and I still was a midwife here in the United States. And in my birth certificate, it says I was born by midwife. I constantly had a fear of like, was I really born by a midwife or did my parents just somehow say that? And I'm really not born here, but it's in my birth certificate. So I'm an American citizen. But why am I afraid? Why am I afraid? But we are so conditioned as a people to be afraid and be told that we can just be kicked out. And that's really like, that's like the society as a whole, right? But you have to really just start asking yourself why you feel a certain way when you know that you're doing everything that you need to be doing. Even like, let's say that my boss called me right now and said, like, hey, I need to talk to you really quick. Right away, I'd be like, oh my God, like I'm gonna get fired. Again, that trauma.
Oh my gosh, the fear and the trauma, I think from being a child of a single parent, that I always thought my mom was the person who was going to call the police for that me then to be in trouble, right? There was also this, like, extra step of, like, my mom was the first line of fear, and then there was, like, the police was right after that, and somehow I don't know how they were gonna communicate. Now as an adult, I don't know where this came from, but when you talk about this, I think about all of the moments that I spent as a child with these wild things in my brain, and then how I brought those into the workplace. And I definitely had a similar experience where a boss was like, "Why do you think I'm against you? Like, why do you think that I'm plotting against you?" And I was just like, I don't know, weird traumatic fear response. I have no idea why I think this. So I can appreciate what you're talking about. And I think as I've gone on in my career, I've had to retrain my mindset. So do you have any tips for people, as you were saying before, there's things that you can do to get over these things? You mentioned meditation, you mentioned affirmations, but what can people really do to work past some of these issues if they don't have access to help or they're afraid to access to help? Like, how do they even start moving towards being able to ask someone or look for a coach, anything like that?
Yeah, definitely. What I would say the start is reading books. I mean, library is accessible to everyone or should be. If it's not, there's a Libby app. There's ways. You can also probably find bootleg copies of books. So if you can find bootleg music, trust me, there's also bootleg books. But not condoning anything illegal before I get arrested for this. No. But no, it really like books have been something that I have personally like again, back to when I said I used to journal, I also used to go to the library. I mean, I would walk. What's really funny is my parents didn't let me go visit any friends, didn't let me go spend the night nowhere, but they didn't have no issue with me walking 3 blocks or maybe it was like 5 blocks and then walking over the expressway to get to the library. I would just be like, I'm going to the library. And I mean, and I was. Probably not in the teenage years, but, anyway, um,
The
I would
chisme
go.
comes out on the podcast.
Well, that's another show. That's the after hour show. Yeah, we talk about
So right, and I would just go. If I had any questions, I would just go and find a book, right? Any question that you have, there's an answer in a book. And that's always been like, so you can always go to a book. And now there's YouTube. The thing with YouTube is that you just don't know how legitimate it is. So know that the information is vetted as you vet it. And then really after, kind of digesting some knowledge because we can't just bank on our own knowledge. We have to know that our knowledge comes maybe from our parents, school systems that again aren't necessarily here for us because they're built on structures that weren't meant for us either. So when you then start creating your own knowledge bank, then you can start to really kind of uncover some of those things because like you said, a lot of times we don't even know and another sign too, just to go back a little bit on how to maybe identify that you're being triggered is when you go from 0 to 60. when you're just having a plain day, everything's going great, and then all of a sudden you find yourself screaming at your children, yourself, or your partner, that's how you know you've been triggered. That is a trigger. Somebody pushed the button and boom, you've just blown up. So when that happens, and trust me, I still get triggered too. Um, you just kind of have to take a step back and take a breath, and then, then you can start, right? And be and apologize. I think sometimes what happens is that we get triggered, we blow up, and then we don't apologize for it. And then that kind of cycle continues. And then it builds up in you, it builds in the other people who maybe they just asked you, "Hey, can you give me that glass of water?" And you're just like, "Get it your fucking self." But when you don't say, "Hey, I'm sorry for that. I don't know what triggered me." Um, you don't open that window, and really just being willing to accept, like, "Hey, I'm sorry for this. I'm sorry that I did that." And acknowledging that maybe what you said or did wasn't okay. It doesn't make it acceptable. It doesn't mean that they have to forgive you. It just means like, "Hey, I recognize that my behavior was something I could have done a little bit differently." And just going online and finding any journal prompts to start doing some evening reflections. It can be very, very simple. Some questions I can share that I started doing, not just with myself, but my kids, and they really enjoy it. I have my 3-year-old tell me, "Ask me another question, mommy." And so one of them is, actually, let me get the book because I'm going to probably forget them. So the questions are, what made me happy today? What challenged me today? And I change it for them and ask them what was hard for them. How did I help someone today? What could I have done differently? And what did I learn about myself? And I love hearing the kids' answers to that. And it's kind of become like our own little like family time. As I mentioned before, right? I have the business and I trying to balance my time. And by doing my journal reflection with them, it gives me time with them that I didn't even realize I wanted to have.
That's amazing, Dr. Reyes. I love that. As a parent advocate, as a consultant for co-parents, I'm always looking for ways to incorporate children into our activities, and I hadn't even thought of that. So I appreciate you sharing that. I'm definitely going to incorporate that with my parents that I work with. I know when I was, my boys now are 22 and 18, and so getting them together reading time is a little difficult. But back when they were young, I also was looking for ways to not only just do my work, but do the work with them together. And I think one of the beautiful things that I'm seeing with you, Dr. Reyes, and that I also see with Wendy, myself, and others like ourselves that have come to realize how important mental health is that we're breaking these structures. We're breaking these generational chains that have held us back. Whether it's from admitting, hey, you know what, I need to go to therapy. A lot of times, for Latinos, Latinas, Latinx folks, we were always told to pray about it. No, 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 tú nomás, just pray about it and, or be stronger, right? Especially for the fellas, like, porque estás hablando, don't talk like that. And, oh, you're this, you're that, this and that. And to break those chains and to see, ourselves not just survive, but thrive and pass those down to our kids. I just want to commend you for that because not only is it part of your practice or your praxis, if you will, but it's also part of your family structure. And I think that's really important that folks get that message. And I want to reiterate that message because it really starts with ourselves. And if we expect our kids to be better, we need to better ourselves first. And I kind of wanted to go into that a little bit, if you don't mind. When you talk about balancing work, when you talk about balancing family, when you talk about balancing yourself, how do you manage that? How I know we talked about relaxing and resting and so forth, but how have you come to terms with that and making sure that, hey, if I'm taking time for myself, I don't feel bad about it. Hey, if I take time for my kids away from work, I don't feel bad about it. Can you go a little bit about that and how maybe you came to that realization, to that point, and how folks maybe can come to their own realization to their point? Because I'll end right here. I definitely, just like your parents, my parents, God bless my dad. I mean, he's a fantastic provider, but he showed up to nothing, And then when he did, it was always with a view of like, it's todo. That's it. That's it. Like Es todo lo que vas a hacer, you know, I mean, even starting my own business recently, 2 years ago, my dad was kinda like, "What are you doing? You're talking to people?" You know, can you go a little bit about what you're doing with your own family, but also tips maybe for parents that you know, are working with their children and how they can kind of start breaking those generational chains, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, first start off small. Start off small. Don't try to change everything from one day to the next. And it's gonna progress and it's gonna change depending on your needs. But definitely start off small. One little thing, maybe it's just asking two of those questions in the evening or one of those questions. Because when we try to make a lot of change, it becomes overwhelming, not just for yourself, but for everybody in the family. And I like that you asked like how to deal with the goals, right? I mean, the time for yourself and not feel guilty because I've definitely would feel guilty if I was working on my for myself. I felt like, "Oh, I got to go save my husband from the kids." Right? Like this underlying like I got to go save him from the kids. But what about him saving the kids from me? But that's just like a thought to myself that I started saying, right? Like wait a minute. And, really, so I would say start off small. I personally started with a very, very simple morning routine back in 2019 that it's progressed to being something completely different now. Um, Whatever works for you. I don't wanna just say, like, do this, this, and this. I will share what I do, but I would say if something seems like, "Oh my god, I can't do that," start off with the baby version of it, but also challenge yourself. So currently now, I actually wake up at 6 a.m. and I don't have to be at work till 8 a.m. This recently came about though, like the last month, and it was an accident because I was always the kind of person that when I saw books that say like you got to start your day at 5 a.m., I'd be like, whatever, you are crazy. I want to sleep till 7:45 because I don't have to be at work till 8 and I can get the kid ready between those 15 minutes. And I would do it. But then that meant figuring out when to do my morning routine for myself, and that could, start to bleed into work and feeling the angst of like, okay, I'm logged on, but then I'm also trying to do this, and then I'm trying to focus on work, and then feeling guilty about like I should be working more or I should do this. Um, so I'll share how it came about. So my husband put the alarm at 6 a.m. a few weeks back, maybe almost a month now. And I told him, I said, "You're gonna put it at 6 a.m. You better wake up." Because he's the kind of person that puts the alarm at 6 a.m., 6:15, 6:20, because he likes to, I don't know what, hear an alarm. To me, I hear an alarm, I'm up. And I actually don't even have it on, I didn't have an alarm myself. For since I had my first son in 2015, I have had 0 alarms. I would just wake up naturally, which I'm really good about waking up. So hearing the constant alarms from him was super annoying. Anyway, I was like, "You better get up." The alarm went off. He did not get up. I got up and I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna do my morning routine that I've been wanting to do completely." So what would happen was that I didn't get to do my whole complete morning routine. Yeah. Now I'm just doing it, and my husband thinks it's funny that, he set the alarm at 6 because him and my son, the 7-year-old, they wanted to wake up early to have time to kind of, like, wake up slowly, have breakfast together, and here I am. And actually and it's funny because so he's the one that would wake up at 7, and I would stay in bed, and he would be the one cooking and getting the breakfast and everything ready for them and lunch. Well, guess who's doing that now? Since I'm up at 6, I do my morning routine, I take my kid, my teenager, and then I help with the making the breakfast, making the lunch, and it doesn't feel so pressured. So, but I just say give yourself time and try different things. Maybe half the year goes by and I'm like, "I don't wanna wake up at 6 anymore." But actually it's been working really great. I don't foresee it, but who knows? I also was the person that said I'd never wake up hours before. But so what I do is I, wake up, I do a yoga flow. I just started a brand new one, but prior to this brand new one, I was doing the same one, the sun salutations. You can Google that. Um, I was doing that since 2019. It's very simple, very basic, and it was really just time to make my body move. And then I journal, I pull some cards, and really the cards are like just to kind of give me like, oh, what should I expect today? And reflect on that. And like so today's card is abundance is a mindset, a state of mind actually. Abundance is a state of mind. And it actually was talking about being more grateful in the book. And so I just kind of reflect on that. And then I take my whole day and I put it on the little planner. And then in the evening, I just fill out the end day. But um, that's what I do, and then I started to ask my kids the questions, and it's been really great to just ask them the questions. So right about bedtime, I bust out my evening journal, which is it's twofold because I would struggle to do the evening reflections because when you're trying to put the kids to bed and you're just trying to unwind yourself, doing a journal, like, in between all of that, you're just like, "Ugh." But when you combine it, it made it so easy because now I've been able to reflect on my evenings with them. And my favorite part is, like I said, the 3-year-old be like, "Mommy asked me a question." And then he is funny because 'cause he'll just make up an answer to the questions and, of course, but that also helps them, right? Helps them start reflecting on their day. So I'm just excited to see what it'll look like for them later in life because it'll be a practice that's just like brushing your teeth. You know, you got to teach them. It's a struggle at first, but eventually everyone just brushes their teeth. Well, hopefully. My parents weren't on me about brushing my teeth. It was something I had to teach myself later. So don't feel bad if you also didn't have parents that kept up with that because, again, they probably didn't have anybody that was telling them that they needed to brush their teeth either.
Yeah, you touched on so many things in this episode that I'm so excited about that you kind of encapsulated a lot of stuff that we talked about in season 1, and especially using manifestation techniques and tools, and we didn't actually say the word, but journaling, pulling cards, being reflective, sitting in reflection time, all of those are skills that you learn when you're trying to manifest the life you want. And I love that that also leads into your podcast, which is called Manifest Your Career, isn't that what it is? Or
Yes.
yeah, and I've been on the podcast, and I think it's a wonderful podcast, but I also wanted to give you a moment to talk about some of these more, quote, unquote, "woo-woo" practices where you're working with some of these tools, but the way that you describe them is so concrete, so I'm hoping people heard the concrete ways you can bring them into your life to support you going on the journey that you envision for yourself. So can you tie it all together and tell us a little bit more about what is a moonologer and how did you decide to name your podcast Manifest Your Career? How does all this tie together for you and what you're doing?
Yeah. So back in 2019, when I started like diving into books again, because books are always my answer to everything. One of the books I read from were from Catherine Sinkina, who is known as Manifestation Babe. And that kind of took me into that like manifesting route. And I was just talking to a colleague earlier today and saying, people sometimes see manifesting as a quick fix, or maybe for some people who grew up very religious, like maybe like that's playing with the devil or something. The word manifest can bring up some fears for some people. But it for me, I feel like manifesting is really just a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you are feeding your mind a lot of negativity by saying I can't, or even just gossiping, and trust me guys, I still gossip too, but um, when you just fixate it, there's a part where you're like, "Oh, did you hear?" And then you just move on, right? But if you just get stuck in the gossip, you get stuck in the negative, that's all you're going to attract. But if you bring in more of the positivity, then you can start changing that self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You can change what you're manifesting into your life. And honestly, I think it's just because I was so into the manifesting world and the whole like spiritual development world that I was like, "Oh, manifest your career would be a cool name." And so I Google it. Nobody had that anywhere like on Instagram. No, like even if you like type in manifest your career, there's very little with those words together. I was like, "It's meant to be mine," because how the heck is manifestyourcareer.com available and for a regular price, not that premium price? You know how they're like $50 and they're like, "I don't wanna pay $50 for a domain, damn it." Um, I probably wouldn't have either now that I think about it. So the God universe knew that it had to be cheap. Um, so, I came up with the podcast name and just kind of went together and putting it together. And really, I wanted to create a space for women of color to come and share their career journeys. Cause I felt that when, I was doing my research and interviewing higher ed executives and hearing their career journeys and how there wasn't this linear path. There was actually it went from here to here to here, and they didn't have this big vision for themselves. Like they knew they wanted to be great, but who doesn't want to be great? And then they just slowly started to navigate that. And I wanted a space to create to share that so that other people of color could hear these stories and hear themselves in the stories and know that, it doesn't matter where they are, you can change where you are. And then here are some of the tools, right? Which are one of the episodes, actually, my most listened episodes is my affirmations. Because if you go and Google affirmations or you go listen to them, oftentimes they're male voices and oftentimes they're not voices that sound like ours. And so I wanted to create affirmations for us so that you could have a voice that sounds like you. Or maybe if it doesn't even sound like you, it's not just necessarily a male voice, it's a different voice. And then also creating meditations for that same reason. Because if you look out there, at least from what I have found, there's very little Latino women that are actually doing these affirmations. So I want to be able to create that space for us. Um, because honestly, I don't want to hear I don't want to hear a man's voice sometimes in my own affirmations. So that was really where that came from. And I'm just thinking back, like, wow, there's times that when I was in college and I wanted to remember stuff, I would record myself and then listen to it going to sleep. So I really think that's where that also came from. Like, I know it works. If I listen to it enough, it's gonna seep into my subconscious. And sometimes that's what you need. And even if they feel silly, um, and I know I'm thinking about like all the times that I did think they were silly, or I thought like, how is this really gonna work? Just keep doing it, and over time, you'll actually begin to enjoy it, and you will actually seek it because your body, your mind is gonna look for what it's used to having, and if it's used to having negativity, it's used to having gossip, it's looking at the news and how terrible the world's going, that's what your mind's constantly gonna be seeking, so you gotta feed it something new and let it adjust, just like healthy food, right? You used to burgers and tacos, and maybe you've never had salad and you're like, salad's gross. But then if you keep eating it, you're actually gonna be like, dang, I really want a good salad.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I am a taco lover myself, and my son and I came back from Puerto Rico and we went to go eat, and part of the plate that I had a salad on it. That salad was so delicious. I don't even it wasn't any different than any other salad I've ever had, but I had not had salad in a while, and so, yes, it tasted fantastic. I wanted to just, you said something earlier that I absolutely love, and as a person who was skeptical or at the very least apprehensive of quote unquote "woo things" or crystals and all that, it really is about manifesting what you wanna believe in. It only works if you believe in it, right? And what I mean by that is, I bought a bracelet, that kind of this was like completely out of my comfort zone, but I brought a bracelet because it was symbolic to me, right? And I won't get into like the whole symbolism of it, but I believed in it. And Dr. Reyes, you won't believe how incredible the interactions I had because of that bracelet. I was able to talk about the bracelet, the symbolism of it, and then people would open up about their stories. And it was a way to kind of share a traumatic experience that I had, and then somebody else had the same experience, and then we would talk about it, and especially among Latino men, to have a emotionally charged conversation about that. And so I just wanted to kind of let folks understand that are listening to the show that are maybe apprehensive of crystals or of things of that nature. Because again, I am completely green to it, but somebody talked to me about it and said, "Hey, no, this might be something that you should explore." I'm 100% sold because I did believe in it, and I saw it serve its purpose. And manifesting your career, manifesting your health, manifesting your wealth, whatever it is you're trying to manifest, the first thing you have to do is believe, right? That you want, that you really deserve it. And you said that earlier. I'm gonna go back and pull that quote, but it was a great quote that you said. I didn't have time to write it down right now, but it really is dependent on how you believe in that. Can you tell me a little bit about how you started on that journey? Because I'm always curious. I know Wendy's very much into it. We talk about it, and I'm still on the fence about stuff, right? But my God, that bracelet, and recently the bracelet broke, right? And my friend who made that bracelet for me, I was sad about it, and she said, "No, it served its purpose." And I thought that was such a beautiful thing to say. It was such a closure or again, changing our perspectives, right? I was seeing it as a sad event, right? Like, oh no. She saw it as a beautiful event. She said, "Hey, this means that it served its purpose. You can let it go now." It completely changed my mindset. It completely like and I'm reflecting right now. I'm like, man, it really did just completely change my mind. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that a little bit more and how they've benefited you and not just that, but maybe just the mindset portion.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and if you even just take that and you put that on anything, the it served its purpose, right? Maybe a relationship, a friendship, an employment, if you take it as like it served its purpose. We need to do that more. Oftentimes we're not really good at closure. And maybe that's something that it's a trauma that's been passed down because if you think about it, a lot of our parents came and immigrated. They never had that closure. And maybe some people can never go back home and not having that closure to be like, it served its purpose and to be able to say that, and but anyway, I'm gonna take us somewhere else, but I'm gonna I'm gonna stay here in your question about, um, the woo-woo and the crystals. So, it was a progression. I mean, maybe before 2019, you had told me to get a crystal, I'd have been like, "That sounds like a waste of money." Um, but now, like, it was a progression, right? Like, reopening those doors and really reigniting my light and reconnecting with my higher self and reconnecting with my higher purpose and knowing that there's a world beyond this place, right? Beyond this physical sphere. Um, and so, that is how that progression has started. And then with crystals, even though I enjoyed buying them and I didn't actually, like, fully buy into them as well, and I think that goes back to, like, we're conditioned to think about things, right? Things are possessions, things aren't living beings, but now, my crystals, I keep looking this way because 'cause they're right there, but, um you work with them and you put an intention on them. And even if you don't believe that the crystal can do that magic, it's not even about that. It is in your mind. You're putting that intention, right? So for you, you put that intention on that bracelet, or your friend gave it to you with that intention on it. And, there it is. And it's doing its job for you. And, of course, I'm assuming that it was like an evil eyes bracelet since it's done its job. And sometimes even if it's not a bracelet that's meant for that, sometimes you do have a bracelet that breaks or a ring or something. And, maybe it served its purpose and maybe doing some reflection on that. So as it was just really a progression and really reading books. And for me, it was like a coming back home because when I was a teenager, I was very interested in the occult, except that there wasn't anything available about our ancestral stuff. There was a lot of Wicca stuff. And so that's the stuff that I would read. And it didn't really connect me in the way that reading our stuff really does. Like I'm now going to a shaman and, I'm reconnecting in different ways. I see your face. You're like, and that started back in November, but it was really like, I'm ready to do that shadow work that, I haven't quite done. And so know that, it's a progression. Sometimes you will feel high and you will be doing great things, but then something will bring you back down. And it's about doing that reflection, like what is going on? What is this triggering? What trauma? What event? Or just feeling the emotions. We are meant to feel sad, guys. Like there's nothing wrong with feeling sad sometimes. The problem with it is it's when it starts to devour you and you have to kind of figure out, okay, How can I move from this? And that's why having that morning routine really kind of helps recenter you. So if you are feeling devoured, you have your morning routine to help you bring you back up and your evening routine. And that's why these things work because we are creatures of habit to kind of help ground us and recenter us. But if we don't have anything that is bringing us back to center, it's much easier to just kind of get stuck in the mud sometimes. So,
Uh,
Yeah. Go ahead, Rodrigo.
you just made Wendy chimes in really quick. You said something really beautiful. It's okay to be sad, and we have to be okay with being sad. And like you said, don't let it devour you though. Just for clarity, the bracelet I had was representative of a miscarriage that a former partner and I had, and I was struggling a little bit because I wasn't talking about it. And so for me, I just said like, I want a bracelet that represents her. We didn't even know if she was a girl, to be honest. But I wanted a little baby girl, right? And so I got this bracelet, and again, Dr. Reyes, really to Wendy as well. It's the manifestation. It's the intention that you put behind it. And so when people would, mention the bracelet, it was almost like it allowed me to open up about that trauma. And then I spoke on it, but I spoke it in a positive light. And I was really grateful because even the last 2 weeks ago, that's when it broke. That weekend prior, I had spoken with another gentleman who had gone through a similar situation. And it seems like, I mean, it was destined that it broke that
yeah.
next
Yeah.
because it really served its intention. So I just wanted to thank you for that. And really, again, the focus is not on the crystals, but it's on the intention and the purpose. So really, just
Mhm.
wanted to advocate that. Go ahead, Wendy.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, I don't wanna let Norma respond if you have anything you wanna share about that.
No, I just think it's beautiful, right? Like it's those intentions we put on it. And sometimes we don't even know what's gonna unfold when we do these things because you had no idea that was gonna happen. But that gives you healing, that gives the other person healing. And anytime that I find these synchronicities happening in my life, I feel like I'm in the right path. Right, because sometimes we go back and forth and, we get busy. I scheduled this, like, months ago or maybe a month ago, I can't remember, I feel so busy. But, like, here I am, and I'm a whole different person than I was when I think I scheduled this. I wasn't doing that 6 a.m. thing, but now I'm able to share it and say, like, "Hey, I don't expect you to be there." It's baby steps, but it's just amazing to hear, and then I know, like, okay, I'm exactly where I need to be, and I really am grateful to be able to be in this space sharing all of this because I feel like even though I'm doing this work and I'm working with clients one on one, I'm not actually sharing about all of this all the time. And I really wish I was. And that's actually my intention for this year. So you guys have, you accidentally have now helped me, right? Because I'm like, I want to give back more to the community and tell the community what I'm doing so that they know because like everyone always says, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We could talk forever. I have a feeling. I'm sure we will. We might do a part two to this episode because there's like so much here that I want to dig into for like the next 3 hours. But I know we've all got things we've got to do. But I want to just say, one, thank you so much for being a beautiful friend and for your friendship. I've always appreciated your support as a person, and I do hope that the two of you being in San Antonio connected person as well. But I think that what I hear about this journey that you've been on is that it's always iterative, and you're always continuing to level up and seeking and having the growth mindset and exploring new options for you, but also new ways that you can make an impact for others. And I know that you make a huge impact through your work. So I just want to give you a little bit of space to tell people, if they resonated with what you said, if they're interested in the services that you offer, how can they, support you in your podcast? How can they connect with you and work with you? And where can people find you online if they're really interested in what they heard today?
Yeah, thank you for that. So, of course, the podcast is Manifest Your Career. The website as well is manifestyourcareer.com. And, even if you're not fully sold on wanting to do coaching or you're not really sure what that means, schedule an appointment with me because I guarantee that you will be able to just dialogue on what's going on. And even if you don't want to do coaching, you will have clarity on what you need to do next for yourself. And I just really want people to take advantage of that opportunity to talk to me one on one. And just be able to say whatever it is that's going on in their careers, because oftentimes we never talk about our careers. I mean, and if we do, it's either, oh, I have an interview, or oh, I have a job. And then, whatever comes after that from whoever we're sharing. But I want to create a space where people can just come and really just talk, and then we go from there, right? If you want to work with me, you do, and if you don't, or maybe there's someone else that I can connect you with. And all you have to do is go to the website. I have plenty of schedule a call link there. So that's how people can get to connect with me.
Well, I think we're wrapping the show up. Is that correct, Wendy? And we appreciate you being here with us, Dr. Reyes. These conversations, we have an idea of what we're going to diverse, but a lot of times when we have a kind of a natural bond, we just end up talking about all kinds of stuff. And I really appreciate your willingness to share anything with us, and tell us a little and let us know a little bit more about the work that you do here in San Antonio and really just throughout the nation. We appreciate your time. Wendy, thank you so much as always for setting everything up. I'm really happy to just be part of the conversation and to, just kind of talk about how important it is for us to really calibrate our mindsets and make sure that we're being the best versions of ourselves that we are. With that said, Wendy, would you like to close us out?
Absolutely. So, this has been another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast with Dr. Norma Reyes. And we're so excited to be bringing you her wisdom and her shares, and just much love and blessings to you and the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Social Impact Level Up podcast. It's been awesome to interview today's guest, and I hope that you leave inspired to take action. If you're looking for any of the information we spoke about, it's probably down in the show notes. Make sure that you're checking them out and you're clicking on any of the links that seem exciting to you. If you are looking for a coach or a consultant to help you with your social impact or your sustainability, reach out to me via my website, hop on my email list, or jump into one of my programs. All of the links are below. So excited to have you as part of the collective. Make sure that you come back and join us for another episode next week.